How do you build a road through land such as this? Without government support, without proper equipment, and even less manpower. Impossible?
By damn, he says. We're going to do it one of these days. That gate over there is going to open up, and I'm going to let anybody that's got a steering wheel or a team of horses come through there, and they'll be as welcome as the flowers in May here at Maxie Heckman's at Narco.
And in all the years I have lived in this land, it seems to me that we are learning a vital lesson that was learned before us from the people who lived here since time immemorial. And that is that this wonderful country gradually shapes us into its own shape. We don't shape the land shapes us. But we have been able to cut a little pathway here and there through it that makes it possible for us to have a day like today when the meeting of the cats is celebrated. I spoke to some of your children today, especially the little ones, because 50 years from now they will be standing here looking at the picture that's taken tonight of all of us and reflecting on all of you and those who are not here tonight, who we also celebrate, who gave their hearts and minds to creating this better way for us all to live.
For hundreds of years, the Nahulk people of the central coast of BC occupied areas all along the coast and major rivers. Trade between the central coast and the interior occurred along the foot trails established by the First Nations people. One such trail was named the Grease Trail, after the trade of oil from the valued ulakan, a little herring-like fish. As fur traders and gold-seeking newcomers invaded BC, so did settlers, and on October 30th, 1894, a group of Norwegian settlers arrived on the central coast in Bella Coola Valley. The Lutheran pastor, Reverend Christian Sogstad, and his men had been promised land in this fertile valley by the Canadian government. Cut off from the interior of British Columbia, it's doubtful that the settlers would have succeeded without the help of the Nahulk, whose dugouts provided much of the transportation up and down the river. By the beginning of the 20th century, as the population grew, it became apparent that a route over the coast mountains and to the rest of BC was desperately needed. Sadly, the population was not large enough to lobby the government to build such a route, and it was feared Bella Coola's overland connection to the interior would never be built. After the Second World War, exasperated valley residents decided to take matters into their own hands. Under the leadership and perseverance of Cliff Copus, the local businessmen formed the Bella Coola Board of Trade, and with only the change in their pockets, less than $250, they started tackling the hill, which would eventually be called the Freedom Road.
I remember some of the things that you are all remembering today, such as when the magnificent spirit that you all have because you're here today was expressed by the memorable Cliff Copus, who in 1952 issued the famous ultimatum that said, "Survey or no survey, the Bella Coola Road will go ahead."
And in particular, we'd like to mention Ike Singh. Ike Singh's store at Anaheim Lake was a very vital part of the connection, bringing the road from Anaheim to Bella Coola, or from Bella Coola to Anaheim.
Yeah, you were the main contact on the Anaheim end.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I remember bringing in dynamite.
Yeah.
Put in my warehouse, and I wasn't too pleased, but I didn't know much about it then.
No. And I know one thing, I enjoyed all the time I spent with you whenever it was up there.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Although the passage over the hill would represent opportunity and freedom to the Bella Coola residents, the big farmers of Anaheim did not look upon the development favorably. But the road did go ahead, and the Board of Trade hired surveyor Elijah Gerry to find a route from Anaheim to Bella Coola. The physically powerful man, Elijah Gerry, covered hundreds and hundreds of miles, blazing a trail through the steep mountainous terrain and thick bush for the men and machines to follow. But finding a path through the swamps may have been impossible, if not for the wisdom of one man in particular. In this rugged wilderness, the Chilcotin people resided for hundreds of years. They lived on the land by the rules of nature. From this ancestry came young Thomas Squinas, whose free spirit danced in the eye of the eagle. And as he grew, so did his incredible understanding and wisdom of the country. Thomas became known by both native and non-native residents as the best hunter and guide in the Chilcotin. It was on a hunting trip that Ike Sing first met Thomas. They became lifelong friends. He eventually helped Ike build his store. So when it came to finding a path through the swamps, Ike knew Thomas was the only man for the job. The board hired him to blaze the final pathway.
Well, he was hunting guide, and he spent more time in that country.
Sure.
He lived in that, quite a bit in that country. He spent a lot of time in that. He was considered the best hunter in that country, white or Indian.
The Bella Coola Board of Trade telephoned Bill Graham of Tatla Lake and offered his company the contract, commencing from the Anaheim side of the hill. Confident that his employee, Alf Bracewell, could do the job, Bill Graham accepted the challenge.
When the Board of Trade contacted Bill Graham, he knew that there was absolutely no money available, and it was all a dream that they were certainly going to follow through with all their ability.
In July of 1952, Alf walked Graham's D6 Cat over 60 miles along back trails to Anaheim Lake to begin bulldozing. The little cat that could launched the gestation period of Bella Coola's long-desired Freedom Road.
Well, it was kind of interesting the way a person thinks, when Bill mentioned we better tune the cat up and check it over, because the Bella Coola Board of Trade wanted him to start building road from Anaheim Lake. And that wasn't too big a deal, but then when you started working on the road, and the farther you got along, the more interesting it became, and more of a challenge as well. And also it kept getting a little more important that you got this little track all the way to where the road quit down on the bottom of the valley, because it was quite important to the people there. But it did grow in importance as we got farther from Anaheim Lake, which I guess is kind of normal, Most people are a little slow thinking, but it did catch up that time.
Alf, together with George Schreiner and Melvin Gerry, son of Elijah Gerry, worked non-stop for 112 days, bulldozing through vast, harsh wilderness, brutal countryside, extraordinarily steep terrain, and swarms of mosquitoes. By freeze-up, 30 miles of passable road through the hill had been completed, almost to Young Creek. This incredible achievement by these men and their communities finally convinced the government to step in with financial support to complete this steep, treacherous road.
The women worked for nothing to begin with. The men worked for nothing to begin with, until we got some money, $60,000 after about a year and a half from the government. Well, that put us on Easy Street for quite a while.
The next summer, about the middle of July, Alf walked the D6 cat back to continue where they'd left off. Switchbacks were made for the steep descent to Young Creek. Here they set up camp for a while with a cooking and accommodation shack. At the same time, the Bella Coola road builders and cat operator George Dulcig began working towards them from the valley bottom.
We got on some of that steep part where the rock started. And, you know, there wasn't much place to put dirt or anything. You just, if you pushed something over the edge, you hoped it stayed there and made the road a little wider without having to go into the bank. But this one day, I'm happily going back and forth and thinking I'm doing all right, and I get out towards the edge and I throw the master clutch out and it didn't stop. So that was kind of a surprise. I pretty near swallowed my chewing tobacco. But then I grabbed both steering clutches and jumped on the brakes and we stopped, and I fooled around and got it into reverse and backed up onto the little more footing, and it was a bit of a surprise. And of course it had to, you know, just to make it thrilling, it had to be about the highest part on the road from the creek. And I never did quite figure out whether the hardest part would be the landing or the starving to death before you hit the bottom.
Melvin Gurr was now the official powderman, and Alex Matheson became the new cook and swamper.
This overhang here used to hang way out. Remember, you used to drive underneath. It was like this.
Yeah.
Well, this had to be drilled from the top, and I was the youngest, so I was asked to go up and drill. Mind you, I was over here at that time when the drilling was to take place. Well, I was drilling there, and there was a little notch about 4 feet wide, and I was right in that area, and I had one of the air legs, and I had a safety rope on from the top there, and that safety rope was uncomfortable, so I took it off, and then when I was drilling, the steel broke, and of course I was free to go, but the air leg with the piston in, it snapped just right and went across that little gulch and pinned me there. And of course the machine was running here, the air compressor, and there was other people drilling down in this area. And I was trying to tell them when they did see me not to shut that air off, because if that air was shut off, that would relax and I would be down there. Yeah. Well, one of the fellows tumbled onto that right away, but anyway, I was out here and I would have been on.
Yeah, I know the rock was way out here.
Yes.
Had a big lean to it.
It had a lean to it like that.
Yeah.
Actually, it would have been, but it was way out. It was way out in the space there. But anyway, I survived.
Yeah.
The completion of the Freedom Road may have never been recorded on film if it were not for Jerry Moore, who later became Mrs. Bracewell. A feisty, confident woman, Gerry was a rancher and a trapper from the Tatlico area. She wanted to see and record on film history in the making. She ventured out with her 2 young sons on horseback, by then a 2-day journey through the mountains to reach the camp.
When we woke up under that spruce tree at just the break of day, we saddled our horses really fast, had a little snack, and hit the road. It was just a cat scar across the meadows, and when he hit the jack pine timber, the trees were laid both sides, and we followed the muddy little trail. There's no way you could get lost. There's only mark in that whole country. And after miles and miles of that, and I kept taking little bits of footage, and then we got to Green River. I rode across first. It's just a lovely, quiet little river, but no bridge. So I rode across the creek and filmed the boys crossing together on their horse, and then we yanked off the saddles and fed the horses and had lunch ourselves, and saddled up and rode on, and eventually we came we went down a steep hill into Young Creek and then had to climb really high afterward to get back up where there was enough dirt, I guess, so they could make a road. So we followed that for a long way. It was very narrow and it was spooky. We didn't ride near the edge because it might spook the horses. We hung right in against the bank, the cut bank on the inside edge. And finally, about sunset, we reached their camp. And boy, that was a long ride, about 40 miles. I was surely happy to get to that camp finally before dark. So we had supper with them. They were just quitting for supper, washing up and all that. And the next morning we got up early and I got a good look at what was happening there. So then I'm running back and forth on this little goat trail in between the two camps. It's about 2,000 feet that they had to complete before the cats would touch blades. And I was running back and forth taking photos of the fellows on the Bella Coola end and then what they were doing on the interior from Anaheim Lake. And I got some really good footage. I got Ole Nucleo packing a bucket of water, well, a jug of water in one hand and some diesel in the other hand, and his backpack was full of rock powder. He was the supplier for Alf's crew on their end. He brought them corn on the cob and everything they had, he backpacked it in. So I said, Ole, what's in your backpack? And he said, I'll show you. And he took it off, and with a big grin on his face, he dumped all this rock powder out on the boulders, and I was sure it was going to blow up. I was horrified, but it didn't. And I just held that camera steady and got that picture no matter what, but I was really scared. He thought that was pretty funny.
When we got up onto the sort of the height of land, the other side of Young Creek, then we hit rock and had to do a lot of blasting. And of course, at that time, the job was kind of nice because we didn't have any government bureaucracy around. We didn't have any union. We didn't have any workers' compensation. We didn't have any UI. Nobody wore hard-toed boots, and nobody had a hard hat. And we crimped the caps onto the fuse with our teeth. And like I asked Mike Stoller, I think he was the only man on the whole job that had a paper of any kind, and he had powderman's papers. And I see he had his crimping pliers in his shirt pocket, and I says, Mike, do you ever use them? He says, no. He says, I just pack them along in case some inspector comes along. So that was his attitude too. He crimped them with his teeth. Which is, you might say, highly illegal, but then it worked. Every one of them went off and we got a road built without the paper. Well, yeah, we accomplished something.
Now I would like to call on Alf Bracewell, who was the driver of the cat from the east.
I'm guilty.
And Melvin Gurr, who was one of the main powdermen on the crew. And can we have the ribbon, please? We're going to ask the minister to perform a ceremonial reopening of the road. In a moment, cutting this ribbon, held by Alf and Melvin, with the scissors that have been kept in the museum, the original scissors that were used, yes, for the cutting of the ribbon. However, just before they do that, I'd like to read you one paragraph from Cliff Copus's chapter entitled The Pygmies and the Mountain Pass. On September 26th, a Saturday, 100 or more people left the seaport village of Bella Coola to drive up to see the wedding of the two road systems. At noon, Powderman Mike Stoller and his Lieutenant Melvin Gurr were still burning powder. But at 1:30, the crowd was invited to be in at the Union. Climbing the steep mountainside or standing a safe distance back on the two road ends, the 100 people watched the Iron Cats perform the wedding dance. A scant 10 yards of broken rock and earth remained to be moved. And as the people watched, the machines danced back and forth in a cadence that pushed obstructions into the gully beneath. A big fir tree fell and was tossed back and forth, then plunged down the mountainside. Clouds of dust arose, then settled, as the two operators idled their engines and brought the blades close together. Then standing, each on his machine's blade, they reached across and shook hands. Their handshake marked the conquering of the mountain pass. Canada had its third outlet to the Pacific.
Celebration of the Bella Coola Road.
How do you build a road through land such as this? With determination, respect, love, and harmony.